The moment I pushed open our bedroom door, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply watched my fated mate, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, bury his face in my stepsister's neck while she moaned his name like a prayer. 3 years. 3 years of being called weak, of swallowing my pride when his mother called me defective, of pretending I didn't hear the whispers at pack gatherings. Poor thing, can't even shift, what kind of wolf can't find her wolf? And all that time, this Marin saw me first. Her eyes, so like our mother's, that pale calculating blue, met mine over Garrett's shoulder. She didn't gasp or pull away. She smiled, slow and satisfied, like a cat who'd finally caught what she'd been hunting. Lila. Garrett rolled off her with all the urgency of a man reaching for his morning coffee. You're supposed to be at the healers. I'd sat in that sterile room and heard words I never thought I'd hear. Pregnant Luna Lila. About 8 weeks along. The little white test was still in my coat pocket. My hand moved toward it now, automatic, protective. I came home early. My voice sounded strange, flat, like it belonged to someone standing very far away. I had news. Marin stretched across my sheets. My sheets, the ones I'd picked out when Garrett and I mated, cream-colored with little silver threads because I thought they looked elegant, and propped herself up on one elbow. The sheet pooled at her waist. She didn't bother covering herself. Well, we have news too. She held up her left hand. A ring glittered there. Not just any ring. Garrett's grandmother's ring. The one he'd told me was lost during the pack's move 3 years ago. We're getting mated. Properly this time. I looked at Garrett. Waited for him to say something. Deny it. Apologize. Show even a flicker of shame. He laughed. Don't look at me like that, Lila. He sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, and reached for his pants. You had to know this was coming. I kept waiting for your wolf to show up, kept giving you chance after chance. 3 years is long enough. My wolf doesn't exist. He said it the way you'd comment on the weather. The healers confirmed it last month. Whatever happened to you at your first shift? It broke something. You're basically human now. I knew about the healer's diagnosis. I'd been there when they delivered it, sat in that same sterile room and heard them explain that my wolf had retreated so deeply she might never surface. But I hadn't told anyone. I'd been too ashamed. How did you? Your father told me. Garrett pulled his shirt over his head. Told the elders, too. They agreed that our mating should be dissolved. Marin's wolf is strong. She'll give me strong pups. My hand pressed harder against my pocket. Strong pups. I was carrying his child right now, and he was talking about strong pups with my stepsister. The elders approved this? Yesterday. He finally looked at me, and there wasn't a trace of guilt in his expression. Just impatience. Like I was a chore he needed to finish before moving on to something more interesting. You can stay in the pack, of course. Your father's still head warrior. But you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Marin will be moving in here. Into my house. It was never your house, Lila. Marin slid out of bed, wrapping herself in a silk robe that I recognized as mine. It was the beta's house. And I'm going to be the beta's mate now. I should have argued. Should have screamed. Should have told them about the baby. Thrown it in their faces. Demanded that the elders reconsider. But then I looked past them to the doorway and saw my father. He stood in the shadows of the hallway, arms crossed, face carefully blank. He'd known. He'd been part of the decision. His own daughter, and he'd helped them throw me away like garbage. Dad. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or just discomfort. It's for the best, Lila. His voice was gruff. You'll understand someday. The pack needs strong bloodlines. Garrett needs a mate who can. Don't. I held up my hand. I didn't want to hear him justify it. Didn't want to hear any of them explain why I wasn't good enough. I'd spent my whole life not being good enough. Not fast enough. Not strong enough. Not wolf enough. My mother had died giving birth to me, and my father had remarried within a year, brought home a new wife and a stepdaughter who was everything I wasn't. Confident. Beautiful. Powerful. I thought Garrett was different. When he'd chosen me as his mate, I'd thought it meant something. That someone finally saw past my failures to the person underneath. Instead, I was just a placeholder, keeping his bed warm until something better came along. "I'll get my things," I heard myself say. Tonight would be best. Garrett was already turning away, reaching for Marin. "The ceremony's tomorrow. It would be awkward if you were still here." Tomorrow. They were mating tomorrow. I walked out of the room, down the stairs, through the living room where I'd hung pictures of Garrett and me. Pictures that were already gone, I noticed, replaced by shots of him and Marin. Through the kitchen where I'd cooked hundreds of meals he'd barely thanked me for. Out the back door into the night. The storm hit me like a wall. I hadn't noticed the weather turning. Hadn't noticed much of anything beyond the scene in that bedroom. But rain lashed down now, cold and vicious, and thunder rolled across the sky like the world itself was angry. Good. Let it rage. At least something felt as broken as I did. I walked. Then I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook, until the pack houses disappeared behind me and the forest swallowed me whole. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. The rain plastered my hair to my face. My clothes clung to my skin. Somewhere along the way I lost a shoe, but I kept moving, kept pushing through underbrush and over fallen logs until finally, my body gave out. I collapsed at the base of an ancient oak, my back against its rough bark, and let myself fall apart. The sobs came in waves, ugly, gulping sounds that the storm swallowed up. I cried for my mother, who I'd never known, for my father, who had never truly loved me, for Garrett and the life I'd thought we would build together, for the baby growing inside me, who would never know its father, because I wasn't going back. Not now, not ever. Let them have each other. Let them have the pack and the fancy house and all the things I'd spent 3 years pretending to care about. I was done being someone's disappointment. A flash of lightning illuminated the forest around me. That's when I realized where I was. The trees here were different, older, darker. Their branches twisted together overhead like gnarled fingers, blocking out even the storm's fury. The ground beneath me was covered in black moss, and the air smelled wrong. Like decay and something older. Something dangerous. The Deadlands. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. Everyone knew the stories. Rogues who crossed into this territory were never seen again. Something lived here, something that even the strongest alphas refused to challenge. I needed to run. Needed to get back to pack territory before a growl cut through the storm. I spun around. The wolf emerged from the shadows like a nightmare taking shape. Massive, bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen. Even the alphas. His fur was pure black, so dark it seemed to absorb the lightning flashes. His eyes gleamed silver in the darkness, ancient and knowing. I stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The oak pressed against my spine. The wolf prowled closer. This was it. This was how I died. Alone in the Deadlands, torn apart by some monster, and no one would even come looking for me. Garrett would probably be relieved. The wolf stopped barely 3 feet away, close enough that I could see the scars crossing his muzzle. Close enough that I could feel his breath, warm against the rain's chill. And then I felt something else. It started in my chest. A tugging sensation, like a hook had caught somewhere beneath my ribs. It spread outward, racing through my veins, and suddenly every nerve in my body was on fire. Not painful, just aware, hyper-aware of the creature before me. No, not just a creature. Mate, the word echoed through me like a bell. But that was impossible. I already had a mate. Had a bond, even if Garrett had broken it. You couldn't have 2 mates. Everyone knew that. Yet here I was, feeling something for this monstrous wolf that made everything I'd felt for Garrett seem like a pale shadow. The wolf's eyes narrowed. Then the air shimmered around him, and between one heartbeat and the next, the wolf was gone. A man stood in his place. Tall, scarred, devastatingly handsome in that dangerous way that whispered of violence and secrets. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and rain ran down his bare chest in rivulets. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle, his silver eyes tracking over my face with an intensity that made me want to run and stay in equal measure. "Well," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel wrapped in velvet. "This is unexpected." I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. "What, who?" "You're from Silvercrest." It wasn't a question. Crossed the border running from something. Or someone. His nostrils flared. "You smell like betrayal and heartbreak." I should have been terrified. This was the Deadlands. He was clearly the reason rogues never returned. But I was so tired of being afraid. "I smell like rain," I said. "And mud. And probably desperation." Something that might have been surprise flickered across his features. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth curved up. "That too." He took a step closer. "You also smell like something else. Something I've been looking for." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No," he agreed. "You wouldn't. Not yet." He tilted his head, studying me with those unnerving silver eyes. "What's your name?" "Lila. Just Lila." "Lila Ashford. Former mate of Garrett Stone. Former member of the Silvercrest Pack." The bitterness in my voice surprised me. Currently homeless, mateless, and apparently lost in territory that's supposed to kill me. It might still. But he said it casually, like discussing the weather. "Tell me, Lila Ashford, do you believe in fate?" "I used to." I laughed and it came out broken. "I was wrong." He circled around me, and I turned to follow his movement, unwilling to let him out of my sight. "Here's the thing about fate. Sometimes it takes everything from you first, strips you down to nothing, and then," he stopped in front of me again, close enough to touch, "then it gives you exactly what you need." "I don't need anything." "Liar." The word was almost gentle. "You need revenge. I can smell it on you. The way your heart beats faster when you think about whoever drove you out here. The anger underneath all that grief." He was right. God help me, he was right. "What does it matter to you?" "Because I need something too." His silver eyes held mine. "I need a mate by morning." I stared at him. "You're insane." "Probably." He shrugged. "But I'm also the alpha of the largest rogue pack in the Eastern Territories. He glanced up at the sky, calculating. 6 hours. Every alpha within 500 miles will be at my doorstep for the annual summit. And if I don't have a Luna standing beside me, 3 of them will challenge me for my territory before the sun sets. So find someone from your pack." "Can't. It has to be a true mate bond." His jaw tightened. "Something they can verify." And until about 5 minutes ago, I didn't have one. The meaning of his words sank in slowly. "You think we're..." "I know we are. You felt it too, don't bother lying. Whatever bond you had with the Silvercrest Beta, it was never real. Not like this." He reached out and pressed his palm flat against my chest, right over my heart. The contact sent electricity shooting through me, and deep in some forgotten corner of my soul, something stirred. Something that felt almost like a wolf. "I can give you everything your old pack took from you," he said quietly. "Power, protection, the chance to make them regret the day they threw you away. And in return, stand beside me at the summit. Let them see that the alpha of the Deadlands has finally found his mate." His fingers curled against my skin, and his voice dropped to something raw and honest. "After that, you can leave. I won't stop you. But I think..." He leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing my ear. "I think once you see what we could be together, you won't want to." This was insane. He was a stranger, a rogue alpha from forbidden territory. For all I knew, he'd killed hundreds of wolves. I should run, should fight, should do anything except stand here considering his offer. But then I thought about Garrett, about Marin in my robe wearing my ring, about my father standing silent while they destroyed my life, about the baby I was carrying, who deserved a mother strong enough to protect them. "What's your name?" I heard myself ask. His smile was slow and dangerous and full of dark promises. Cade Nightshade, Alpha of the Shadow Court. He held out his hand. So what do you say, little wolf? Do we have a deal? Wanting to see what would happen next? Subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. I should have said no. Any sane person would have. A strange alpha appears from the shadows of forbidden territory, offers you a devil's bargain, and you're supposed to run screaming in the opposite direction. That's basic survival. That's common sense. But common sense had gotten me a cheating mate, a treacherous stepsister, and a father who'd sold me out without a second thought. Maybe it was time to try something different. You want me to be your fake mate? I said slowly, testing the words. For one event. Nothing fake about it. Cade Nightshade, if that was even his real name, hadn't moved his hand from my chest. I could feel my heartbeat pounding against his palm, and I knew he could feel it too. The bond is real. I'm just offering you an exit strategy afterward, if you want one. That's unusually generous for a rogue alpha. I'm an unusual rogue alpha. Rain continued to pour down around us, but I barely noticed anymore. Something about his presence seemed to push everything else to the edges of my awareness. The cold, the storm, the ache in my feet from running barefoot through the forest. All of it faded when I looked into those silver eyes. Why me? I asked. If you're really an alpha, I am. Then you could have anyone. Probably have packs lining up to offer you their daughters. Why take some broken, wolfless cast-off from Silvercrest? Something shifted in his expression. For just a moment, the dangerous charm slipped, and I saw something underneath. Something almost like recognition. Because you're not broken, he said quietly. You're not wolfless, and you're definitely not a cast-off. His thumb traced a small circle over my heart. You've been lied to, Lila, about a lot of things. I think it's time someone told you the truth. And that someone is you? A stranger I met 5 minutes ago in the middle of forbidden territory. Would you rather go back? He tilted his head toward the direction I'd come. I'm sure Garrett and your stepsister would love to have you at their mating ceremony tomorrow. You could throw rice, wish them well, watch them start the life that was supposed to be yours. My hands curled into fists at my sides. That's cruel. That's honest. He finally dropped his hand from my chest, and I felt the loss of contact like a physical blow. I'm not going to sugarcoat things for you. Your old pack threw you away. Your mate betrayed you. Your father chose politics over blood. Those are facts. The only question now is what you're going to do about it. And you think becoming your fake queen for a night is the answer? I think it's a start. He smiled, and there was something wolfish in it. Something that reminded me he'd been a massive black predator just minutes ago. One night, one event. After that, you'll have options you can't even imagine right now. I thought about the baby, about the life growing inside me that no one knew about. If I went back to Silvercrest, that child would be raised in shame. The unwanted offspring of a rejected, wolfless mate. They'd grow up hearing the same whispers I'd endured. Poor thing. Defective. Weak. But if I stayed here, what exactly would this marking involve? I asked. Cade's eyes gleamed. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. He began to circle me again, and this time I let him. There was something almost hypnotic about the way he moved. Fluid and powerful, like he was always ready to shift back into that massive black wolf at a moment's notice. A marking is a claiming, he explained. My teeth on your throat. My scent mixed with yours. After tonight, every wolf you encounter will know you belong to the Shadow Court. And Garrett's mark will be erased. He stopped behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his bare skin. Whatever claim he had on you ends the moment I make mine. That's pack law. A true mate bond supersedes any previous marking. The mark on my neck, Garrett's mark, the one he'd given me 3 years ago on our mating night, throbbed at the words. It had never felt right. I told myself I was imagining things, that the discomfort would fade with time, but it never had. Every day it burned a little more. like my body was trying to reject something that didn't belong. "It'll hurt," I said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Cade didn't bother lying. But only for a moment. And then, his breath was warm against my ear. "Then you'll feel what a true bond is supposed to feel like. And you'll understand exactly how much your old mate stole from you." I closed my eyes. The rain was starting to ease, but the thunder still rolled in the distance. Like the storm couldn't quite decide if it was finished with us yet. "One event," I said. "One night as your mate. And then I can leave. If you want to." There was something in his voice, confidence, maybe, or certainty, that suggested he didn't think I would. "Do we have a deal?" I thought about Garrett's face when he'd laughed at me, the casual cruelty of it. The way he'd talked about me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person he'd promised to love. I thought about Marin stretching across my sheets, wearing my robe, flashing my ring. I thought about my father's silence. "Yes," I said. "We have a deal." Cade's hands settled on my shoulders. Gentle, despite the strength I could feel coiled in them. Slowly, he turned me to face him. "This is going to be intense," he warned. "A true mate marking isn't like what you experienced before. It's not just physical. He paused, searching for words. "It's everything. Every wall you've built, every defense you've created, they'll come down. At least for a moment. You need to be ready for that." "I'm ready. Are you?" Those silver eyes searched mine. "Because once I mark you, there's no going back. The bond will be real, permanent. Even if you leave after the coronation, you'll always be connected to me." Something about the word snagged my attention. Coronation. Later. He lifted one hand to my face, brushing wet hair back from my cheek. "Right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that, Lila?" Trust. Such a simple word for something so complicated. I trusted Garrett, and he'd destroyed me. I trusted my father, and he'd betrayed me. Every time I'd opened myself up to someone, they'd used it against me. But standing here in the rain, looking up at this scarred stranger with his silver eyes and his impossible offer, something felt different. The pull between us wasn't just attraction. It was deeper than that. Older. Like some part of me had been waiting for him long before I knew he existed. "Yes," I whispered. "I trust you." Cade's eyes darkened. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, tilting my head to expose the curve of my throat, where Garrett's mark still burned like a brand. "This is going to hurt," he said again, "but only for a second. And then I promise, everything changes." His lips brushed my neck, soft as a question. I felt his breath, hot against my skin, and then, his teeth sank into my flesh. Pain exploded through me. Not the dull ache I'd felt when Garrett marked me, but something sharp and electric, like lightning striking the base of my skull. I gasped, my hands flying up to grip Cade's arms, nails digging into muscle. But the pain didn't last. Almost as quickly as it had come, it transformed into something else. Something that felt like fire and ice and starlight all at once, racing through my veins, filling every empty space inside me. Colors burst behind my closed eyes, sounds amplified, the rain on leaves, the thunder retreating, the beating of two hearts synchronizing into one rhythm. And then I felt her, my wolf. She rose from the depths where she'd been sleeping for so long, stretching, awakening, pressing against the inside of my skin with a presence I'd almost forgotten. Not dead, not gone. Just waiting for something, for someone, for this. A sob caught in my throat. All these years, I'd thought she'd abandoned me, that something was broken inside me, some essential piece missing. But she'd been there the whole time, hiding, protecting herself, protecting me. From what? The question barely had time to form before Cade pulled away. I staggered, suddenly unsteady, and his arms wrapped around me to keep me upright. For a long moment we just stood there, me trembling against his chest, him holding me like I might shatter if he let go. "There she is," he murmured against my hair. "Hello, little wolf. We've been waiting for you." I pulled back just enough to look at him, and that's when I saw it. His eyes had changed. They weren't silver anymore. They blazed with pure, molten gold, brighter than any wolf's eyes I'd ever seen. Not amber like a beta, not even the pale silver of a strong alpha. This was something else entirely. Something that tugged at memories I didn't know I had, whispered of prophecies and power and secrets buried so deep they'd become myth. Your eyes, I breathed. Cade's expression flickered. For just a heartbeat, I saw something that might have been uncertainty cross his features. Then it was gone, replaced by that dangerous, knowing smile. You recognized them. No, I don't know. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that seemed to have settled over my thoughts. They're gold. That's not possible. The only wolves with golden eyes are royalty, he finished for me. The bloodline of the first pack. Rulers of all wolfkind. He reached up and tucked a strand of wet hair behind my ear. Did you never wonder, Lila, why a pack like Silvercrest would accept a wolfless mate for their beta? Why your father, a decorated head warrior, would allow his only daughter to be treated like garbage? Because I was weak. Because I couldn't shift. Because they were afraid of you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, and this time Cade let me go. That doesn't make sense. I'm nobody. You're the daughter of Elena Ashford. His voice had changed, becoming formal, almost ceremonial. The last surviving heir of the Moonfire Pack. The pack that was slaughtered 23 years ago, when the council decided that some bloodlines were too dangerous to let survive. My mother. He was talking about my mother. My mother died in childbirth, I said automatically. The words I'd been told my entire life. There were complications. She died protecting you. Cade's golden eyes held mine, and there was no cruelty in them now. Only a terrible, gentle truth. The council sent assassins to kill you both. Your mother fought them off long enough for your father to escape with you, but she didn't survive. He took you to Silvercrest, changed your name, buried your mother's history. And then he spent the next 2 decades making sure you never discovered what you really are. My legs gave out. I hit the ground hard, knees sinking into the black moss, and I couldn't seem to make myself get up again. The rain had stopped completely now, but I was shaking so hard it didn't matter. No, I whispered. No, that can't be. He wouldn't. But even as I said the words, pieces started clicking into place. My father's distance. His willingness to let Garrett's family treat me like dirt. The way he'd looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't watching, not with disappointment, but with something that might have been fear. And the healers. The pack healers who'd told me my wolf was gone. Suppressed beyond recovery. Had they been lying too? Had everyone been lying? Your wolf wasn't dormant because she was weak, Cade said quietly. He crouched down in front of me, bringing himself to my level. She was dormant because she was too strong. Because if she'd emerged at your first shift like she was supposed to, every alpha within 1,000 miles would have felt it. And they would have come for you. Come for me? Why? Because wolves like you, wolves like us, aren't supposed to exist anymore. He reached out and took my hands in his. His skin was warm despite the rain, warm and steady, an anchor in a world that had suddenly started spinning. The council wiped out the royal bloodline centuries ago, destroyed anyone who might challenge their power. But they missed a few. Your mother's line, mine. His thumbs traced circles on my palms. And now, after all these years, we've finally found each other. I stared at him, at his golden eyes and his scarred face and his impossible words. The event, I said slowly, the one you need a mate for. It's not just a summit, is it? His smile returned, but it was different now. Sharper. Hungrier. The smile of a wolf who had been waiting in the shadows for a very long time. No, he agreed. It's not. Then what is it? Cade rose to his feet and pulled me up with him. His hands moved to my waist, steadying me, and I was suddenly very aware of how close we were standing. How the bond between us hummed like a live wire, electric and demanding. For the past 300 years, The council has ruled the wolf world through fear and politics. They killed the royal lines. They divided the packs. They made sure no one wolf could ever be powerful enough to challenge them. His voice dropped to something low and dangerous. But they got sloppy. They stopped looking. And while they were busy playing their games, I was building an army. An army, I repeated faintly. Every rogue who escaped the council's justice. Every pack that was crushed under their heel. Every wolf who lost family to their purges. His golden eyes blazed. They've been gathering in the shadows, waiting for a king who could lead them, waiting for a queen who could stand beside him. And that's me? That's you, Lila? He cupped my face in his hands, and the touch sent sparks racing through my blood. The daughter of Moonfire, the heir to a throne that's been empty for 3 centuries. The mate that fate has been hiding, protecting, preparing for this exact moment. Couldn't breathe. This was too much. Too fast. An hour ago, I'd been running from my cheating mate, convinced I was worthless. Now this stranger was telling me I was royalty, that my whole life had been a lie, that I was supposed to be a queen. The summit, I managed. The one at dawn, isn't a summit. Cade's thumbs stroked along my cheekbones, gentle despite the fierce light in his eyes. It's a coronation, mine. And now, thanks to fate and a storm and your bastard of an ex-mate, it's going to be yours too. I can't. I'm not. You are. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. Feel your wolf, Lila. Really feel her. Tell me what she's saying. I closed my eyes, reached inward, toward that presence I'd almost forgotten existed, and found her. She was magnificent, powerful in ways I couldn't begin to understand, with fur as white as fresh snow and eyes that burned with the same golden light as Cade's. She looked at me across the darkness of my own soul, and I felt her recognition, her welcome, her hunger. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the crown and the power and the chance to make every wolf who'd ever called her weak regret it with their last breath, including Silvercrest, including Garrett, including my father. They will kneel, she whispered, the first words she'd ever spoken to me. They will all kneel before us, or they will burn. My eyes flew open. Cade was watching me with something like satisfaction, like he'd known exactly what I would find when I went looking. What did she say? He asked. I thought about lying, thought about pretending I was still the weak, wolfless girl who had run into the Deadlands to die. But that girl was gone now. She'd been ripped away the moment Cade's teeth touched my throat. She said they'll kneel, I whispered, or they'll burn. Cade's smile was all teeth. That's my queen. He pulled back just enough to offer me his hand. The coronation begins at dawn. We have a lot to do before then. Are you ready to become who you were always meant to be? I looked at his hand, scarred, strong, offering me everything I'd never dared to dream of. Then I looked past him, toward the direction of Silvercrest, toward Garrett, who was probably curled up with Marin right now, satisfied that he'd finally gotten rid of his defective mate, toward my father, who had lied to me every single day of my life, toward all the wolves who had whispered and laughed and made me feel like nothing. I took Cade's hand. I'm ready. He pulled me close, and for one moment, we just stood there in the fading darkness. His heart beat against mine. His wolf called to my wolf. The bond between us pulsed with power and promise and something that felt terrifyingly like destiny. Then let's go change the world, little wolf. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, brief, almost reverent. But first, let's get you some dry clothes. Queens don't shiver. He led me deeper into the Deadlands, toward a future I couldn't begin to imagine. Behind us, the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. In 6 hours, every alpha in the Eastern Territories would gather to witness the crowning of a new king. They had no idea his queen would be the wolfless reject from Silvercrest. They had no idea that the bloodline they thought they destroyed had been hiding in plain sight for 23 years. They had no idea that everything was about to change. And somewhere in the direction of Silvercrest, Garrett Stone woke up next to his new mate, never knowing that the woman he'd thrown away was about to become the most powerful wolf in the world. He'd learn soon enough. They all would. Chapter 3. The Shadow Realm was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd expected darkness, decay, the kind of crumbling ruins that matched the terrifying stories told about the Deadlands. Instead, Cade led me through a shimmering barrier of mist and into a kingdom that stole my breath. Towers of black stone rose against a sky painted in perpetual twilight, their spires reaching toward stars that seemed closer here, brighter, more alive. Crystal bridges connected the structures, glowing with an inner light that cast everything in shades of silver and shadow. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliff faces surrounding the central palace, their thunder a constant rhythm beneath the sounds of wolves going about their lives. Thousands of them. Everywhere I looked, there were wolves, in human form and animal, gathered in courtyards and along the crystal pathways, their eyes tracking us as Cade led me toward the palace at the heart of it all. "Welcome to Shadowmere," Cade said, his hand still wrapped around mine. "Home of the Shadow Court for the past 3 centuries. Hidden from the council. Hidden from everyone who would see us destroyed. It's beautiful," I breathed. "It's yours now." He glanced at me, and something flickered in those golden eyes. Something almost vulnerable before it disappeared behind his usual mask of control. "Try not to burn it down." Before I could respond, a swarm of attendants descended upon us. I barely had time to register what was happening before I was separated from Cade and swept into a whirlwind of activity. Women with sharp eyes and efficient hands stripped away my ruined clothes, and with them, the last remnants of my life in Silvercrest. They bathed me in water that smelled like moonflowers and midnight. They dried my hair and braided it with threads of silver. They painted my lips and lined my eyes and draped me in silk so black it seemed to absorb the light around me. Through it all, they barely spoke to me, but they spoke to each other, and I heard every whispered word. "She's wolfless. Can you believe it? Rejected by a beta. And now she's supposed to be our queen? The king must be desperate. Or mad. Probably both." I kept my face carefully blank, just as I'd learned to do during 3 years of marriage to Garrett. Let them whisper. Let them doubt. They'd learn soon enough. My wolf stirred at the thought, and I felt her approval like a warm ember in my chest. She was awake now, fully awake, and she didn't like being underestimated any more than I did. When the attendants finally finished, they led me to a mirror, and I saw a stranger looking back. The woman in the reflection wore power like a second skin. The black silk gown clung to her curves before cascading to the floor in waves of darkness. A circlet of twisted silver sat upon her brow, and her eyes, my eyes, burned with a light I'd never seen in them before. I looked like a queen. I looked like someone who had never spent a single day being called worthless. "The king awaits," one of the attendants murmured, and then I was moving again, swept along corridors and down staircases until I emerged into a great hall filled with more wolves than I'd ever seen in one place. They parted before me like water around a stone. And there, at the far end of the hall, standing before a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian, was Cade. He wore black as well, but where my gown was silk and softness, his attire was leather and armor. A crown sat upon his dark hair, not delicate like mine, but savage, made of twisted metal that looked like it had been forged in fire and fury. He watched me approach with those molten golden eyes, and his expression gave nothing away. This was not the man who had held me in the rain. This was the Alpha King, distant, cold, commanding. I stopped at the base of the dais, unsure of the protocol. Did I bow? Kneel? We'd had no time to discuss any of this. "My mate," Cade said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "My queen." He descended the steps and took my hand, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that looked romantic from a distance, but felt oddly formal up close. Then he turned us to face the crowd. "Wolves of the Shadow Realm, today begins a new era." The rest of his speech washed over me in a blur of rhetoric and ritual. I stood beside him, playing my part, smiling when he smiled, inclining my head when he gestured toward me. The perfect mate, the perfect queen. But in the moments between the public displays, when the crowd's attention shifted elsewhere, Cade barely acknowledged my existence. He didn't explain the ceremony, didn't tell me what was coming next, didn't so much as glance at me unless there were witnesses to observe it. The bond between us thrummed with an emotion I couldn't identify. His? Mine? Both? I didn't have time to puzzle it out. The coronation was only beginning. Hours passed in a procession of rituals I didn't understand. Oaths were sworn. Blood was shed, willingly from what I could tell, though the sight still made me queasy. Alphas from territories I'd never heard of approached the throne and bent their knees, pledging loyalty to Cade in exchange for protection, resources, promises I couldn't follow. Through it all, I stood beside my new mate and pretended I belonged there. It was during a brief recess, when Cade was pulled away by his generals to discuss something urgent, that I finally had a moment to myself. I slipped away from the great hall and found a small library off one of the side corridors. A sanctuary of leather-bound books and flickering candles that reminded me painfully of happier times. My mother had loved to read. One of my few memories of her was the scent of old paper and the sound of her voice reciting stories. I traced my fingers along the spines of the nearest shelf, not really seeing the titles, when something caught my eye. A tome, larger than the others, bound in white leather that seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight. No title marked its spine, but something drew me to it anyway. I pulled it from the shelf and opened it to a random page, and stopped breathing. The Prophecy of the Blood Moon, the header read in elaborate script. As spoken by the seer Marceline on the eve of the last royal birth. I knew I should put it back, should find Cade and ask him directly. But my hands were already turning pages, my eyes already devouring words that would change everything. When the blood moon rises over Moonfire's keep, a child shall wake who was born to sleep. Daughter of queens, mate of the king, she'll save his throne or destruction bring. If bound in love, she'll raise him high. If bound in fear, they both shall die. The choice rests not with moon or fate, but with the mother who guards the gate. I read the passage 3 times, my heart hammering against my ribs. A seer had prophesied about me, about Cade, about a bond that had existed since before I was born. And my mother had known. The next pages confirmed what I already suspected. 23 years ago, when my mother was pregnant with me and Cade was just an infant prince in the Shadow Realm, a formal bond had been proposed between our bloodlines. The last 2 surviving royal houses united through their children. But my mother had refused. The entries grew fragmentary here, scattered notes rather than formal records. Elena Ashford rejects the bond on behalf of her unborn daughter. Claims the prophecy promises destruction, not salvation. States she will not sacrifice her child to fate. 3 days later, the council attacks Moonfire. Elena Ashford dies defending her daughter. The infant princess vanishes. My mother hadn't died in childbirth. She'd died fighting assassins. And she'd rejected my bond to Cade because she thought it would destroy us both. Interesting reading material. I spun around, slamming the book closed. But it wasn't Cade standing in the doorway. It was Garrett. He looked exactly the same as he had last night. Handsome in that too-polished way, his Beta's insignia gleaming on his chest, his smile sharp enough to cut. Behind him, wearing a gown of pale blue that did nothing to hide the small but unmistakable swell of her belly, stood Marin. "Hello, Lila." Garrett stepped into the library, and my wolf surged forward with a snarl that I barely contained. "Or should I call you Your Majesty now? What are you doing here?" "Same as everyone else. Paying tribute to the new king." His eyes raked over me, lingering on the black silk, the silver circlet, the mark on my throat that was definitely not his anymore. Imagine our surprise when we arrived and discovered that the mysterious new queen was my former mate. "Imagine," I said flatly. "It's quite a trick you've pulled." Marin drifted closer, one hand resting on her stomach in a gesture that was clearly calculated. "Running away in tears last night, and showing up as royalty this morning. How did you manage it?" "Maybe I was just hiding my true power all along." Marin laughed. That same superior, tinkling laugh I'd heard 1,000 times. You? Power? Please. We both know you're still the same pathetic, wolfless disappointment you've always been. Whatever game you're playing with this so-called king, it won't last. Men like him don't want women like you. My wolf wanted to rip her throat out. I smiled instead. You're right, I said pleasantly. Men like Garrett certainly don't. But Cade isn't like Garrett. I let my gaze drop meaningfully to her belly. Enjoy your pregnancy, Marin. I hear beta pups are so common. Her face went scarlet. Garrett stepped forward, his hand closing around my wrist hard enough to bruise. Listen to me, you. I'd remove that hand if you want to keep it. Cade's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood in the doorway, filling it with his presence, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. His golden eyes were fixed on Garrett's grip on my arm, and the look in them promised violence. Garrett released me immediately, stumbling back a step. Alpha King. He managed a bow that was just shy of mocking. We were simply renewing our acquaintance with your lovely queen. Old friends, you understand. I understand that you touched my mate. Cade moved into the room, fluid and deadly, positioning himself between me and my former pack. I understand that you hurt her. I understand that you're either very brave or very stupid, and I'm betting on the latter. Cade. I placed my hand on his arm, and some of the tension in his shoulders eased, though his glare remained fixed on Garrett. They're not worth it. No, he agreed. They're not. But he didn't move. Garrett's composure cracked, just slightly. We have delegation rights. The council has no authority here. Cade's smile was pure predator. And by morning, they'll have no authority anywhere. So I suggest you return to the Great Hall, sit quietly with the rest of the Silvercrest contingent, and pray that I'm too busy being crowned to remember how badly I want to tear out your throat. For a moment, I thought Garrett might actually challenge him. His hands clenched at his sides, and something dark flickered in his eyes. Then Marin tugged at his arm, whispering urgently, and the moment passed. This isn't over, Garrett said as he turned to leave. For you, it is. Cade's voice followed him out the door. One more word to my queen, and I'll have your head mounted in my throne room. The threat hung in the air long after they were gone. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. You didn't have to. Yes. Cade turned to face me, and for just a moment, the cold mask slipped. I did. Something passed between us. Something that felt like understanding or maybe just recognition. Two people who had both learned what it meant to be alone. Then the mask was back, and Cade was gesturing toward the door. The ceremony's about to resume. We should go. The Great Hall was even more crowded than before. Word had spread about the new Queen's confrontation with the Silvercrest delegation, and I felt the weight of 1,000 stares as Cade led me back to the dais. Some were curious. Some were skeptical. Some were openly hostile. Let them look, my wolf whispered. Let them see what we become. The final phase of the coronation was the most elaborate yet. Cade knelt before the throne while the eldest member of his court, a woman with silver hair and ancient eyes, recited words in a language I didn't recognize. Oil was poured over his brow. Smoke rose from braziers placed around the hall. The very air seemed to thicken with power. I stood to the side, watching, my role in this portion nothing more than witness. That's when I felt it. A wrongness in the air. A discordant note in the symphony of magic and ceremony. My wolf surged to attention, her senses suddenly on high alert. I scanned the crowd, searching for the source of my unease, but saw nothing out of place. Nothing except, there, in the shadows of the gallery above, a glint of metal. Time slowed. I saw the crossbow bolt leave its launcher. Saw it arc through the air with deadly precision, aimed directly at Cade's unprotected back. Saw that no one else had noticed, that everyone was focused on the ceremony, that in another heartbeat my mate would be dead. And then I stopped thinking. And my wolf took over. The shift happened faster than I knew was possible. One moment I was standing on 2 feet, dressed in black silk. The next I was airborne, for paws launched from the ground, my body moving on pure instinct as I threw myself between the bolt and its target. The impact was nothing. A pinch against my shoulder that I barely registered. What I registered was the screaming. What I registered was the chaos erupting around me as guards swarmed the gallery and the crowd surged toward the exits. What I registered was the way every single wolf in that hall had fallen utterly, completely silent, staring at me with expressions of shock and terror and something that looked almost like awe. I looked down at myself. White fur. Pure, impossible white, glowing with an inner light that seemed to rival the crystal bridges outside. My wolf wasn't just awake. My wolf was legendary. The Guardian, someone whispered. Then louder, the White Guardian. The prophecy. It's true. I didn't understand. Couldn't process what was happening. I was still stuck in combat mode, still scanning for threats, still ready to fight. But there was no one left to fight. The assassin had been captured. I could see guards dragging a struggling figure from the gallery. The bolt in my shoulder was already being pushed out by my healing factor, the wound closing before my eyes. I shifted back to human form without meaning to, and someone rushed forward to drape a cloak over my naked body. The black silk dress lay in tatters at my feet. Cade was staring at me, not with gratitude, not with relief, not even with the cold distance he'd shown me all day. He was staring at me like I was an answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. You, he breathed. It was always supposed to be you. I don't understand. My voice came out hoarse. What just happened? What's the White Guardian? But before he could answer, before he could explain any of it, his general pushed through the crowd. A massive wolf in human form, scarred and grim-faced, with eyes that held no room for softness. My king, he bowed, then straightened. We've captured the assassin. Who sent them? The general's gaze flickered to me. Something like pity crossed his features, the first emotion I'd seen from him, before his expression hardened again. No one sent him, sire. He acted alone. A pause. The assassin is Adrian Ashford, head warrior of the Silvercrest Pack. The world tilted. The general's words seemed to come from very far away. He's also the Queen's father. I felt Cade's hand close around mine. Felt the bond between us surge with something complicated, protectiveness, fury, and underneath it all, a grief that might have been his or might have been mine. Probably both. My father had tried to kill my mate. My father, who had lied to me my entire life, who had helped Garrett throw me away, who had known about the prophecy, about my mother, about everything. He'd let the council slaughter my mother. He'd let me believe I was broken. And now, when I'd finally found where I belonged, he tried to take that from me too. By killing the only person who had ever seen me as something more than worthless. The crowd parted as guards dragged a familiar figure forward. My father looked older than he had yesterday. His face was bruised, his warrior's uniform torn, his proud bearing reduced to something small and desperate. But his eyes, when they met mine, held no remorse, only fear. Lila, his voice cracked. Lila, you don't understand. You can't trust him. The prophecy. Silence. Cade's command rolled through the hall like thunder. You'll have a chance to speak at your trial. Right now, the only words I want to hear are the ones that explain why I shouldn't kill you where you stand for trying to murder your own daughter's mate. I was trying to save her. My father struggled against the guards. The prophecy says she'll destroy you. If you die, she lives. I had to. Enough. The word came from me. I stepped forward, and the crowd drew back. I was still wrapped in nothing but a borrowed cloak, still covered in my own blood, still shaking from the shift. But my wolf was with me now, fully merged, fully present, and she was done being afraid. I was done being afraid. You lied to me, I said, and my voice echoed through the silent hall. My whole life, about my mother, about what I am, about everything. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself. The realization hit me as I spoke it. You were afraid. The council killed my mother, and you were too much of a coward to fight back. So you ran. You hid. You spent 23 years pretending I was nobody, hoping they would never notice me. And when I finally became something you couldn't ignore, you tried to kill the only person who ever told me the truth. My father's face crumbled. But I wasn't finished. The prophecy says I'll either save the Alpha King or destroy him. I let my gaze sweep the crowd. All those wolves who had whispered about me, doubted me, underestimated me. My mother chose fear. She broke our bond because she was afraid of what I might become. I looked at Cade, and my mate, at the man who had offered me a deal in the darkness and ended up offering me so much more. I choose love. The words hung in the air, resonating with power I didn't know I possessed. Then Cade smiled. Not his dangerous smile, not his distant smile, but something real and raw and full of wonder. "There she is," he murmured. "My queen." The crowd erupted. I didn't know if they were cheering or protesting or simply releasing hours of pent-up tension. I didn't care. All I cared about was Cade's hand finding mine again, our fingers intertwining, our bond settling into something that felt like forever. We'd deal with my father's trial later. We'd deal with the prophecy, the council, Garrett and Marin, and all the wolves who still thought I was nothing. Right now, in this moment, I was exactly where I belonged. And God help anyone who tried to take it from me. Chapter 4. The dungeon beneath the Shadow Palace was colder than I'd expected. Not the dungeon I currently occupied, that would come later. No, this was the royal viewing chamber, where prisoners were brought before the crown for judgment. Where my father now knelt in chains, his warrior's pride stripped away, his eyes fixed on the stone floor beneath him. I stood beside Cade's throne, wearing a fresh gown of midnight blue that the attendants had provided after my dramatic shift destroyed the black silk. The wound in my shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a faint scar that my wolf assured me would fade within days. My father's wounds would not heal so easily. The guards had not been gentle with him. Bruises mottled his face, and blood crusted at the corner of his mouth. He looked old in a way I'd never noticed before. Diminished, somehow, as if the secrets he'd carried for 23 years had finally crushed him under their weight. "Adrian Ashford." Cade's voice rang through the chamber, cold and formal. "You stand accused of attempted assassination of the Alpha King. How do you plead?" My father raised his head. His eyes found mine, and I saw something there that might have been regret, or might have been fear. With him, I was no longer sure I could tell the difference. "Guilty," he said. "But I acted to protect my daughter." A murmur rippled through the assembled court. Cade silenced it with a raised hand. "Explain." "The prophecy." My father's voice cracked. "The same prophecy that killed my wife." Elena knew what it meant, that if Lila bonded with the Shadow King, one of them would destroy the other. She gave her life trying to break that fate. And I. He swallowed hard. I spent 23 years trying to honor her sacrifice. By lying to your daughter? Cade's tone could have frozen fire. By suppressing her wolf? By allowing her to be abused and rejected by a pack that should have treasured her? By keeping her alive? My father strained against his chains. "You don't understand. The prophecy doesn't just say she'll save or destroy you. It says the bond will consume her, body and soul. Either she loses herself in your darkness, or she burns trying to fight it." I felt the blood drain from my face. Consume her, body and soul. I thought of the mate bond, pulsing between Cade and me like a living thing. Thought of how quickly I'd said yes to his bargain. How easily I'd let him mark me. How completely I'd surrendered to a man I'd known for less than a day. Was that love? Or was it the prophecy, already eating away at who I used to be? "The prophecy is not your concern." Cade rose from his throne, descending the steps with predatory grace. "Your only concern now is the sentence I'm about to deliver." Cade. The word left my lips before I could stop it. He paused, turning to look at me with those golden eyes that gave nothing away. "You wish to speak, my queen?" My queen. Not Lila, not his mate. Just my queen, formal and distant. The same way he'd addressed me all day. He's my father, I said quietly. Whatever he's done, he's still my father. He tried to kill me. He thought he was protecting me. And that makes it acceptable? Cade moved closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. He let you suffer for 23 years. He watched your mate betray you and said nothing. He stood in the doorway while they humiliated you and did not lift a finger. Now you want me to show him mercy? I want you to show me who you really are. Something flickered in his expression. A crack in the armor. The prophecy says I'll either save you or destroy you, I continued. If you execute my father without a trial, without evidence beyond his own confession, without giving me a chance to understand why, which path do you think that puts us on? Cade stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned back to the court, his face once again an unreadable mask. The prisoner will be held pending a full investigation. Any execution will be delayed until the Queen has had time to examine the evidence. His voice hardened. But make no mistake. If Adrian Ashford is found guilty of conspiracy against the crown, no bond of blood will save him. My father slumped in relief. I felt nothing but cold. The investigation began immediately. Cade assigned a team of scholars to examine every piece of documentation related to the prophecy, the Moonfire Pack, and my mother's final days. I was given access to all of it, though whether that was a gesture of trust or a test, I couldn't tell. The first thing I learned was that my mother had been more than just a refugee fleeing assassins. She'd been a thief. The Heartstone, the head scholar explained, spreading ancient diagrams across the library table. A sacred artifact of the Shadow Realm, dating back to the founding of the first pack. It was said to contain the essence of the original Alpha, the source of all royal power. I stared at the drawings. A crystal, roughly the size of a fist, depicted with rays of light emanating from its core. My mother stole this? The night she fled, yes. The Heartstone vanished from its reliquary, and every attempt to track it failed. The scholar, an elderly woman named Vera, peered at me over her spectacles. Until now, we assumed it was destroyed. But recent events suggest otherwise. What recent events? Your shift, Majesty. Vera's eyes held something like wonder. The White Guardian hasn't appeared in 5 centuries. The last wolf to manifest that form was the daughter of the first Alpha himself. The form requires a connection to the original bloodline that simply shouldn't exist anymore. But I'm from Moonfire, not the Shadow Realm. Moonfire was a splinter pack from the original Shadow Court. The bloodlines are connected, if distantly. Vera hesitated. But that connection alone wouldn't explain your transformation. Something else is amplifying your power. Something that bridges the gap between your Moonfire heritage and the heart of the Shadow Realm itself. The Heartstone. You think it's inside me? I said slowly. I think your mother hid it inside you. Fused it to your spirit, probably within hours of your birth. Vera's voice was gentle but firm. It would explain why your wolf was suppressed for so long. The Heartstone is immensely powerful, but it's not meant to exist within a living host. Your wolf would have been fighting it for dominance your entire life. I thought of all those years feeling broken, feeling less than, feeling like some essential piece of me was missing when really, it had been buried under the weight of a power I was never supposed to carry. How do I get it out? I don't know if you can. Vera gathered the diagrams, her movements careful. But I do know that the king needs to be told. If the Heartstone truly resides within you, it changes everything about the prophecy, about the balance of power in this realm. I'll tell him, but even as I said the words, I wondered, would it matter? Cade had kept me at arm's length all day, playing the besotted mate for the crowds while barely acknowledging my existence in private. Did he even care about me as a person? Or was I just another piece in whatever game he was playing? I was on my way to find Cade when I encountered Marin. She was standing in one of the corridor alcoves, her back to me, speaking in urgent whispers to someone I couldn't see. I should have kept walking, should have ignored her and continued with my mission. Instead, I pressed myself against the wall and listened. Moving too slowly, Marin was saying. The assassination failed, and now the Ashford girl is more entrenched than ever. We need a new approach. Patience. The voice that answered her was deep, masculine, and familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. The king is vulnerable. His bond with the Moonfire heir is still fresh. If we can destabilize it before it fully forms. How? She saved his life in front of the entire court. She manifested as the White Guardian. Even the wolves who doubted her are starting to believe. Then we give them something else to believe. A pause. What about the father? His execution would drive a wedge between them. The king postponed it. Apparently the little queen asked nicely. Then we find another pressure point. The man's voice turned cold. What about the child you're carrying? Is it convincing? My blood froze. Convincing enough, Marin said. Garrett believes it's his. The timing works. And when the truth comes out? It won't. Not until we're ready. Not until the Shadow King is dead and our forces control the realm. Marin laughed softly. Then I'll tell Garrett exactly whose child he's been raising. The look on his face will almost be worth 3 years of pretending to love him. Couldn't breathe. The child wasn't Garrett's. The entire affair, the betrayal, the mating ceremony, all of it had been a facade. A distraction while Marin and her mysterious ally positioned themselves for something far worse than stealing another woman's mate. They were planning a coup. I needed to find Cade. Needed to warn him immediately. But as I turned to run, a hand closed around my arm. Going somewhere? General Marcus stood behind me. His scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth at all. He was the one who had announced my father's capture. The one Cade trusted to guard the realm. And he was Marin's mysterious ally. Let me go, I demanded, trying to summon my wolf, trying to shift. Nothing happened. Did you think we wouldn't prepare for your newfound abilities? Marcus produced a syringe from his pocket. Empty now, but I could feel the effects of whatever drug he'd injected into my arm while I'd been distracted. Wolfsbane concentrate, refined to target the transformation pathways. You won't be shifting for at least 12 hours. Marin emerged from the alcove, her smile sharp and satisfied. Hello again, sister. I told you this wasn't over. The dungeon they threw me in was very different from the royal viewing chamber. Dark, damp, cold enough that my breath misted in the air despite the fact that it was supposedly summer in the Shadow Realm. The stones were slick with moisture and things I didn't want to identify, and the only light came from a single torch guttering in a bracket at the far end of the corridor. I wasn't alone. Garrett sat against the opposite wall, his fine clothes torn and dirty, his face bearing the marks of a beating that made my father's injuries look minor. Well, he said, his voice rough. This is ironic. I sank onto the cold stone floor, my borrowed gown already ruined. What are you doing here? Tried to warn you. He laughed bitterly. Would you believe I actually had a moment of conscience? Found out Marin was playing me. That the baby isn't mine. That she's been working with Marcus this whole time. And thought maybe I should let someone know. So you came to find me. Stupid, right? The woman I threw away. The one I mocked and betrayed. And I thought she'd want to hear the truth from me. He leaned his head back against the wall. Marcus was waiting. Apparently Marin predicted I'd crack. Had guards ready to grab me the moment I went looking for you. They were planning this all along. I realized. The affair. The rejection. All of it was designed to weaken Silvercrest's connection to the Shadow Realm before the coronation. Looks like it. Garrett's voice was hollow. I was just the useful idiot. The beta who couldn't keep his pants on. I wanted to hate him. Part of me still did. But looking at him now, beaten, betrayed, facing execution for trying to do the right thing for once in his miserable life, I couldn't summon the energy. The baby, I said quietly. If it's not yours, whose is it? Marcus. Garrett spat the name like a curse. General of the Shadow Realm's armies. Second in command to the king himself. He's been positioning himself for years, apparently. Building alliances. Planting moles in other packs. waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment is now. With you out of the way, there's no white guardian to protect the throne. Your father's execution will be blamed on the king's cruelty. Marcus will challenge for leadership, and half the army will back him because he's been quietly earning their loyalty for years. I felt sick. All of it. My entire life had been manipulated by forces I didn't understand. My mother's death, my suppressed wolf, Garrett's betrayal, every humiliation, every heartbreak, every moment I'd spent believing I was worthless. All of it connected to a conspiracy that spanned decades. What happens to us? I asked. Garrett met my eyes. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine fear there. We die at dawn. Marcus announced it while they were dragging us down here. Public execution, meant to send a message. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Lila, for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but it doesn't, I agreed. But I hear you. We sat in silence after that, the torch flickering shadows across the damp stone walls. I tried to reach my wolf, tried to feel her presence inside me. But the wolfsbane had done its job well. She was there, I could sense her, but she was muffled, distant, unable to help. The hours crawled by. I must have drifted off at some point, because I dreamed of white fur and golden eyes and a throne made of starlight. I dreamed of my mother, young and fierce, cradling something bright against her chest as she ran through flames. I dreamed of Cade, his cold mask finally cracking, his voice breaking on a word I couldn't quite hear. And then I woke to something I'd never experienced before. The mate bond pulsed. Not with the distant hum I'd grown used to over the past day. Not with Cade's carefully controlled emotions, held back and filtered before they could reach me. This was raw. This was desperate. This was a hurricane barely contained, fury and fear and something else. Something that felt like love but burned hotter, fiercer, more terrifying than any emotion I'd ever experienced. Lila, his voice, in my head, not spoken aloud but transmitted through the bond itself. A connection neither of us had tried to use before. I've been protecting you from myself. I pressed my hand against my chest, against the place where the bond lived. I could feel him now, really feel him without the walls he'd been keeping between us. He was afraid. Not of me, not of the prophecy, not of the destruction I might bring. He was afraid of losing me. I thought if I kept you at arm's length, the prophecy couldn't come true. I thought if I didn't let myself feel this, you'd be safe. Tears burned in my eyes. All day I'd watched him play the cold, commanding king. All day I'd wondered if he felt anything for me at all, or if I was just a pawn in his game. I'd been wrong. He'd been running from the same fear that had defined my entire life. The fear of being too much, of wanting too much, of loving so deeply it becomes a weapon. But they have you now. His mental voice cracked with something that sounded almost like grief. They took you while I was keeping my distance, and if I just let myself, Cade. I pushed my own thoughts through the bond, hoping he could hear me as clearly as I heard him. I'm in the dungeons. Marcus and Marin, they're working together. There's going to be a coup. I know. The fury in his voice was barely leashed. My spies have been feeding me information for the past hour. Half my guard is loyal to Marcus. The other half is fighting to reach me. What are you going to do? A pause. Then his voice returned, and this time there was no fear in it. No doubt. No careful control. Only the absolute certainty of a king who had just discovered his limits, and found them unacceptable. I will burn this kingdom to ashes before I let them take you from me. The bond blazed with heat, with promise, with something that felt almost like war. But first, I need you to trust me. Can you do that, little wolf? I thought of everything that had happened since I'd pushed open that bedroom door and found Garrett with Marin. The betrayal, the flight, the impossible bargain with a stranger in the storm. I thought of the prophecy, that I would either save the Alpha King or destroy him. And I thought of the choice my mother had made all those years ago. She'd chosen fear. She'd broken our bond, hidden the heartstone inside me, and died running. I was done running. I trust you. The bond pulsed once more, brighter this time, stronger. And then Cade's voice returned with a single word that somehow contained both a warning and a promise. Good. Because what happens next is going to hurt. The torch at the end of the corridor flickered, and somewhere above us the first screams began. Chapter 5. The screams grew louder. I pressed myself against the bars of my cell, straining to see down the corridor. The single torch guttered violently, casting wild shadows across the damp stone walls. Metal clashed against metal somewhere above us. Swords, I realized. The sound of battle. What's happening? Garrett scrambled to his feet, his face pale in the flickering light. Cade. I could feel him through the bond now, closer than before. A storm of fury and determination cutting through the palace like a blade. He's coming. Coming? The entire guard is loyal to Marcus. He'd have to fight through. An explosion rocked the dungeon. Stone dust rained from the ceiling. The torch went out, plunging us into absolute darkness. I heard Garrett curse, heard the distant thunder of collapsing walls, heard wolves howling in a cacophony of rage and fear. Then light returned. Not from the torch, from the stairwell at the end of the corridor, where fire bloomed like a living thing, golden and hungry and utterly controlled. It didn't spread to the walls or floor. It simply illuminated the figure descending through the chaos. Cade looked like a god of war. Blood streaked his face and arms. His armor was dented, his crown missing, his golden eyes blazing with a light that seemed to rival the flames themselves. Behind him, bodies littered the stairs. Guards who had tried to stop him and failed. He'd fought his way through his own palace to reach me. Lila. He was at my cell door in seconds, his hands gripping the bars. Are you hurt? The wolfsbane. I can't shift. He didn't wait for me to finish. His hands wrapped around the iron bars, and with a sound like breaking bones, he wrenched them apart. The metal screamed in protest, but it gave way before his strength, creating a gap wide enough for me to slip through. I stumbled into his arms. For one moment, just one, he held me, his face buried in my hair, his chest heaving, his entire body trembling with the force of emotions he'd spent so long trying to suppress. I thought I'd lost you, he breathed. When I felt the bond go quiet, when I realized they'd taken you. I'm here. I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I'm here, and I'm not leaving. But Marcus is about to learn what happens when you threaten my mate. The cold, commanding king was back. But underneath it, I could still feel him, the man who had knelt in the rain and offered me a deal that changed everything. What about me? Garrett called from his cell. I helped warn her. Doesn't that count for something? Cade's gaze shifted to my former mate, and for a moment I thought he might leave him there. The fury in his eyes certainly suggested it. He tried to do the right thing, I said quietly. At the end, when it mattered. He spent 3 years doing the wrong thing. I know, but he's not our enemy right now. Cade held my gaze for a long moment. Then, with a sound of disgust, he gestured toward the cell. Get him out. He can make himself useful or he can die with the rest of the traitors. His choice. One of Cade's wolves, a massive gray beast who had followed him down the stairs, shifted to human form and began working on Garrett's cell. I recognized him as one of the guards who had stood watch during the coronation. Loyal, apparently, despite Marcus's efforts. How many are with us? I asked as we moved toward the stairwell. About half the palace guard. The other half declared for Marcus when he announced his challenge. Cade's jaw tightened. He's been planning this for years. Longer than I knew. By the time my spies brought word, he'd already positioned his forces throughout the palace. And the coronation guests? The other alphas. Most fled at the first sign of trouble. A few stayed to fight, either for me or against me. His hand found mine, gripping hard enough to bruise. Right now, our forces are evenly matched. We're holding the throne room, but Marcus controls the armory and the main gates. So it's a stalemate. It was. His golden eyes met mine, and something fierce burned in them. Until I got you back. The palace was chaos. Wolves fought in every corridor, every courtyard, every shadowed alcove. Bodies lay where they'd fallen, some in human form, some still wearing their fur. The beautiful crystal bridges I'd admired earlier that day were shattered, their fragments crunching under our feet as we made our way toward the throne room. Cade fought like nothing I'd ever seen. He moved through his enemies like water through stone, his wolf's power infusing every movement even in human form. Guards who challenged him lasted seconds at most. Those who saw him coming and fled lasted only slightly longer. But it wasn't enough. For every enemy he cut down, two more appeared. Marcus had planned well. His forces were disciplined, coordinated, fighting with the desperation of wolves who knew they'd die if they lost. "There are too many," I said as we finally reached the throne room doors. "Even with your loyal guards, we can't win a war of attrition." "No." Cade paused at the entrance, his breath coming hard. "We can't. Which is why we're not going to fight one." "Then what?" He turned to face me, and his expression was unlike anything I'd seen from him before. Vulnerable, hopeful, afraid. "The prophecy," he said. "All my life, I've been terrified of it. Terrified that my mate would destroy me, that love would be my downfall, that the only way to survive was to keep everyone at arm's length." He reached up and touched my face, his fingers gentle despite the blood on them. "But I was reading it wrong." "What do you mean?" "It doesn't say you'll destroy me, Lila. It says you'll destroy the king. And the king isn't just a person. It's an institution, a system, a kingdom built on cruelty and fear and the belief that power comes from domination rather than love." I thought of Marcus, of Marin, of all the wolves who had followed them, who had believed that strength meant crushing everyone beneath you. "The corruption," I breathed. "The corruption." Cade nodded. "That's what you're meant to destroy. Not me. Never me." His voice cracked. "I was so afraid of losing you that I almost lost you anyway. I kept my distance, built my walls, and it nearly killed us both." "Cade, the artifact inside you, the Heartstone, it's the source of all royal power in the Shadow Realm. It doesn't just amplify your abilities, it gives you authority over every wolf who swore fealty to the crown." His hands moved to my shoulders, gripping tight. "Marcus's wolves took an oath when they joined my guard. An oath that binds them to the throne. If you invoke the Heartstone's power, you can strip that oath from them. Strip their wolves entirely." "I can't. I don't know how." "Yes, you do." He pressed his forehead to mine. "Your mother hid that power inside you for 23 years. It's part of you now. You just have to let it out." The wolfsbane was still in my system. I could feel it, a cold fog dulling my connection to my wolf, to the bond, to everything that made me more than human. But underneath that fog, something else stirred. Not my wolf. Something older. Something that had been sleeping inside me since the moment I was born, waiting for this exact moment. The Heartstone. I closed my eyes and reached for it. Power exploded through me like a second sun. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except hold on as energy I didn't understand poured through every cell in my body. The wolfsbane burned away in an instant, consumed by a force that made it seem like nothing. My wolf surged forward, and this time, nothing held her back. I shifted, not into the massive white guardian I'd become at the coronation, something different, something more. My fur blazed with inner light, my eyes burned gold and white together, and when I threw back my head and howled, the very stones of the palace trembled. Every wolf in the Shadow Realm felt it. Through the Heartstone, through the ancient oaths that bound them to the throne, I could sense them all. Hundreds of wolves, locked in combat throughout the palace. Half loyal to Cade, half sworn to Marcus, and all of them, every single one, connected to me. "Kneel." The command wasn't spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. It flowed through the oaths themselves, through the magic that had bound these wolves to the Shadow Realm for centuries. "Kneel or be stripped of everything you are." Marcus's wolves fought it. I could feel their resistance, their fury, their desperate attempts to reject the authority I was claiming. But the Heartstone was absolute. The oaths they had sworn were absolute. And in the end, even the strongest will broke against the power of a Luna fully awakened. One by one, throughout the palace, the traitors fell to their knees. I found Marcus in the throne room. He was still standing when I entered, the only one of his followers who had managed to resist the command. Sweat poured down his scarred face, and his muscles trembled with the effort of remaining upright, but his eyes blazed with defiant hatred. "Impossible," he snarled. "The Heartstone was destroyed. We made sure. You made sure of nothing." I shifted back to human form, and Cade was immediately at my side, draping his cloak over my shoulders. I barely noticed. All my attention was fixed on the man who had orchestrated so much pain. "My mother was smarter than you, stronger than you. She hid the Heartstone where no one would ever think to look, and she gave her life to protect it. Your mother was a fool who didn't understand what she was dealing with." Marcus took a staggering step toward me, his wolf fighting against my hold with everything it had. "The prophecy says you'll destroy the king. Did you think that just meant the crown? It means everything. The realm, the people, the very foundations of our world. You're not a savior. You're an extinction event wearing a pretty face. The only thing I'm going to destroy," I said quietly, "is you." I reached for the Heartstone's power again, but this time I didn't command kneeling. This time I reached for the very core of what made Marcus a wolf. His eyes went wide. "No, you can't. That power was lost. No Luna has been able to." "I'm not just any Luna." I pulled. The sound Marcus made wasn't human. It was something between a scream and a howl, torn from the deepest part of his being as I ripped his wolf away from him. I felt it separate. The animal spirit that had been part of him since birth, the source of his strength and speed and power, the very essence of what made him a werewolf. And then it was gone. Marcus collapsed to the ground, suddenly horrifyingly ordinary. Just a man. Scarred, aging, trembling with the shock of losing everything he'd built his identity around. "You'll live," I told him, my voice cold, "but you'll live as what you always were underneath. A coward who thought cruelty was the same as strength." Guards moved forward to drag him away. I let them, but there was still one more confrontation waiting. Marin found me in the ruins of the Crystal Bridge. Or maybe I found her. It was hard to tell, in the chaos of the aftermath, who was hunting whom. But when I turned a corner and saw her standing there, her pale blue dress torn, her carefully styled hair in disarray, her beautiful face twisted with hatred, I knew this moment had been inevitable since the night I'd caught her in my bed. "You were supposed to stay nothing," she screamed. "That was the whole point. I spent 15 years making sure you believed you were worthless. 15 years playing the perfect stepsister while I fed your insecurities and undermined every relationship you tried to build. And it worked. You were broken. You were pathetic. You were exactly what we needed you to be. 15 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. You were planted in my family when you were a child?" Marcus saw potential in me. Marin laughed wildly. "My mother was one of his agents. When she married your father, I was already trained in exactly how to keep you down. Every time you started to believe in yourself, I was there to tear you apart. Every time someone might have loved you, I made sure they saw your flaws first." "Garrett. So easy." She smiled, and there was nothing sane in her expression anymore. "All I had to do was show up at the right moment, say the right things, and he forgot you existed. Men are so predictable when you know which buttons to push." I thought of all those years, the constant comparisons, the subtle barbs disguised as sisterly concern. The way my confidence had eroded so slowly I hadn't even noticed until there was nothing left. She had done that, deliberately, systematically, and she had enjoyed every moment of it. "It doesn't matter now," Marin continued, pulling something from the folds of her dress. A knife, I realized, silvered, ceremonial, probably stolen from the palace armory. "You think you've won, but you haven't. Marcus was just the first wave. There are others who want the Shadow Realm destroyed. Others who will finish what we started. Then I'll stop them too. You'll try. She lunged. The knife never reached me. My wolf moved faster than thought, faster than Marin's human reflexes could track. One moment I was standing in the ruins of the bridge. The next I was behind her, my teeth closing on the wrist that held the blade, forcing her to drop it with a cry of pain. I shifted back to human just as she scrambled for the knife. Don't, I said quietly. She froze, her hand inches from the blade. I could kill you, I continued. Right here, right now, and no one would blame me. You tried to murder me. You conspired to overthrow the throne. You spent 15 years destroying my life for a cause you don't even believe in. Then do it. Marin's voice shook. Kill me. Prove you're just as much of a monster as the rest of us. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the hatred to the fear underneath. She was terrified, not of death, but of irrelevance, of being nobody after spending her whole life being important in someone else's scheme. No, I said finally. Death would be too easy. You don't get to escape what you've done by dying. I reached for the Heartstone's power once more. Marin screamed as I bound her wolf, not stripping it away entirely, but locking it deep inside her where she could feel it but never touch it. Never shift. Never run. Never be anything but an ordinary human in a world full of wolves. You'll be exiled, I told her. Your crimes will be announced to every pack on this continent. And you'll spend the rest of your life knowing exactly what you threw away. I'll find a way back, she snarled. I'll build an army. You'll try. I turned my back on her, letting the guards move in to take her away. And I'll be waiting. The trials took 3 days. Every wolf who had supported Marcus was judged. Some were stripped of their wolves. Some were exiled. A few, those who had been coerced or deceived, were pardoned with conditions. My father was the last to stand before the throne. He looked better than when I'd seen him in the dungeons, but not by much. The weight of his secrets had aged him in ways that went beyond the physical. When he knelt before Cade and me, I saw a man who had spent 2 decades drowning in guilt and fear, and I didn't know whether to hate him or pity him. Adrian Ashford, Cade intoned from his throne. You have confessed to the attempted assassination of the Alpha King. By the laws of the Shadow Realm, the punishment is death. My father closed his eyes, accepting the judgment. However, Cade's voice shifted, softening almost imperceptibly. The Queen has provided evidence that your actions, though criminal, were motivated by a desire to protect your daughter. A misguided desire, a destructive desire, but a father's desire nonetheless. I felt my father's shock through the Heartstone, felt his disbelief, his desperate hope. You are hereby pardoned of the charge of attempted assassination, Cade continued, but you are banished from the Shadow Realm. You will return to Silvercrest, where you will spend the rest of your days reflecting on the choices that brought you here. And you will never, his voice hardened, interfere in your daughter's life again. Do you understand? I understand. My father's voice broke. Lila, don't. Couldn't look at him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Just go. The guards led him away. And finally it was over. The throne room emptied slowly after the final judgment. I stayed on the dais, too exhausted to move, watching the last of the courtiers file out. The past 3 days had been a blur of politics and protocol, of learning my new role as Luna of the Shadow Realm while still processing everything that had happened. Garrett had returned to Silvercrest in disgrace, his beta title stripped, his reputation destroyed. The Pack Council had appointed a new beta, someone who hadn't been involved in Marcus's conspiracy, and Garrett had been relegated to the lowest ranks, forced to work his way back up from nothing. Part of me thought it was less than he deserved. Another part recognized that he'd tried, at the end, to do the right thing. Perhaps that counted for something. Perhaps it didn't. You should rest. Cade's voice startled me. I'd been so lost in thought that I hadn't heard him approach. I could say the same to you. I turned to find him standing at the base of the dais, still wearing the armor he'd fought in 3 days ago. He hadn't slept either. I could feel it through the bond. The battle's over. You don't need to keep standing guard. Old habits. He climbed the steps slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. Besides, I needed to do something first. What's that? Instead of answering, he knelt. Right there at my feet, in the empty throne room, the Alpha King of the Shadow Realm went to his knees before me. Cade, I've been king since I was 15, he said quietly. I've never knelt to anyone, not to the council, not to the other alphas, not to any power in this world or the next. He reached for my hand, holding it gently between both of his. But I'll kneel to you every day if it means you'll stay. Not because of prophecy, not because of politics. Because you walked into the Deadlands ready to die, and instead, you taught me what it means to live. Tears burned in my eyes. 3 days ago, I'd been a broken, wolfless reject, fleeing into a storm because I had nothing left to lose. Now I had everything. I don't need you to kneel, I whispered, pulling him to his feet. I need you to stand beside me. His arms wrapped around me, and for a long moment we just held each other. Two wolves who had both spent their lives expecting to be alone. Then I heard footsteps. The throne room doors had opened again, and wolves were filtering back in. Courtiers, guards, servants. Everyone who had witnessed the coronation and the battle and the trials. They gathered in the great hall, watching us with expressions that ranged from curious to awed to uncertain. 3 days ago, they had whispered about the wolfless queen, about the nobody who had somehow ended up on the throne. I turned to face them, Cade's hand still clasped in mine, and let my eyes glow white. The Shadow Realm has a new Luna, I announced, my voice carrying through the hall. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with my wolf. Silence. Then slowly the first wolf knelt. Then another, and another, until the entire court was on their knees, heads bowed, acknowledging me not because I was Cade's mate or because the Heartstone demanded it, but because I had earned their respect. And I had done it without losing myself in the process. Epilogue. 6 months later. The nursery glowed with soft moonlight. I stood by the window, 2 small bundles cradled in my arms, watching the stars wool overhead. Behind me, I could feel Cade's presence, warm and steady, his love flowing through the bond like a river of gold. They're beautiful, he murmured, coming to stand beside me. His hand reached out to stroke the downy hair of our daughter, then our son. Twins, born under a new moon, both with their father's dark hair and their mother's pale eyes. I still can't believe they're real. Neither can I. I leaned into him, feeling the strength of his body against mine. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now you're the Luna of the Shadow Realm, the White Guardian reborn, and the mother of the next generation of royal wolves. He pressed a kiss to my temple. Quite a turnaround. Quite a turnaround, I agreed. The door opened softly, and one of our guards entered with a bow. Forgive the interruption, Majesties, but a messenger has arrived with urgent news. I exchanged a glance with Cade. Urgent news was rarely good news. Send them in. The messenger was young, barely more than a pup, and his face was pale with exhaustion. He'd clearly been running for hours. My king, my queen. He dropped to one knee. I bring word from the Eastern Border Patrols. There have been sightings in the Deadlands. Sightings of what? The messenger swallowed hard. Marin Ashford, Majesty. She's been spotted gathering forces in the abandoned territories. Rogues, exiles, wolves cast out from their packs for crimes too severe to forgive. He looked up, and fear shadowed his young face. She's building an army, and our scouts report she's not alone. There's someone with her, someone powerful, someone who's helping her find a way to break the binding on her wolf. I felt Cade's hand tighten on my shoulder. How many forces? He asked, his voice hard. Hundreds, Majesty. Maybe more. Growing every day. The twins stirred in my arms, sensing the tension, and I rocked them gently back to sleep. Marin. Of course it was Marin. I'd known exile wouldn't be the end. Known she was too consumed by hatred to simply accept her fate and disappear. But I'd hoped we'd have more time. Time to strengthen our alliances, to heal the wounds left by Marcus's betrayal, to raise our children in something resembling peace. Thank you, I told the messenger. Rest, eat, recover your strength. We'll need you to guide our forces back to the eastern border when the time comes. The messenger bowed and departed. Cade turned to me, his golden eyes dark with concern. We should prepare. We will. I shifted the twins carefully, then handed them to him, watching as his fierce expression softened into something unbearably tender the moment they settled against his chest. But not tonight. Tonight we hold our children. We remember what we're fighting for. And tomorrow? I crossed to the window again, looking out at the shadow-draped kingdom that had become my home. Somewhere in the darkness, Marin was plotting her revenge. Somewhere, an army was growing, fueled by hatred and the promise of destruction. But I was no longer the broken girl who had fled into the storm. I was the White Guardian, the Luna of the Shadow Realm, the woman who had destroyed corruption with love instead of violence, who had turned her weakness into her greatest strength, who had found her happily ever after and refused to let anyone take it away. Tomorrow, I said, letting my eyes glow white in the darkness. We remind my dear stepsister exactly why she should have stayed gone. Cade's smile was all wolf. That's my queen. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.